Welcome one, welcome all, welcome to another exciting episode of Tales of Citizens right here on the Sound Strategy Network. Also brought to you by Legacy Gaming and Unrepentant Gaming. I am Bridger, I'll be your host for today as we dive into the deep questions about Star Citizen. And we're glad you got a hold of the program, however you may have found it, but let's jump right in to introduce our co-hosts. With me, as always, is my good friend, Mr. Gray from Legacy Gaming.
Good to see you again, Bridger.
Hello, hello. And we normally would have another good friend with us, Mr. Calathulu from Unrepentant Gaming, but he is off having a new citizen being born.
Or pirate. That was the question, or pirate.
Yeah, it's either a citizen or a pirate. We have yet to determine the exact nature of this birth, but it's happening. So congratulations to him, and we wish the luck and any other, there's no complications of any kind to him, but let's jump into the show. So we always start with a quick segment called Life in the Verse, where we talk about the various things that we're doing both in and out of Star Citizen. So Gray, what have you been up to recently within the gaming sphere?
Well, I did try Fortnite. That was suggested to me, I believe, by you?
Yes.
All the folks. And it wasn't bad. I actually did enjoy the gameplay quite a bit. But I did notice that the missions were incredibly long. I was expecting a little more compact, and it ended up spanning more than an hour and a half. I was like, what's going on here? Why is this taking so long?
That's
Not
a little
bad.
longer than I experienced, I gotta say.
Yeah, I don't know. It might have been people I was playing with. It might have been the fact that I'm totally incompetent as an engineer. We did end up winning, but it was a really lengthy map. The rocket fuel one or something like that.
Yeah, some of them can be longer. I know that some of them are sort of shorter by design. Like, you have only a certain amount of time, and it's usually like 15 or 20 minutes in order to actually complete it. And you can choose which game mode you want, so there's that's kind of nice. I enjoyed it a lot. It still definitely does feel very alpha. I mean, there's a lot of repetition because they haven't added all of the different types of game modes and things that you can do yet.
It did feel a lot like tower defense, in all honesty, which isn't a bad thing. When you combine that with Minecraft effect, I mean, really, that's what it is. It's tower defense and Minecraft.
It is.
It's kind of a fun combination. I did notice that the melee and the weapons felt either clunky or really, really powerful with very little in the middle, which I assume is just a balancing thing for them.
Yeah, that makes sense. The other thing that I found is it was very interesting sort of exploring the maps and gathering resources the first few times I did it, but the more often it just...
punching trees.
Yeah, just hitting trees over and over. Like, you have to do that at the beginning of every session. I do like the, let's figure out the most efficient way to build a defensive base for this specific spot, and it changes each map. Like, that puzzle element of it, and working with other people, like, okay, you fortify the east side there, because there's going to be some guys coming in from that side. I'll fortify the west side, and then finding out that somebody has a leak, and you're like, damn it, Billy, why didn't you plug that hole?
You know, how big of a leak do you want, and where do you want it? Do you want to try to funnel all the zombies?
Exactly. Yeah.
And for us, we just built walls. The people I was working with in all the games, we just built walls, and we had, crushers and electrocution stuff and all that. But I feel like there might be some value to, like, hallways that spiral in, and you just punch the big things when they come in. Who knows?
Yeah, we had some fun, and there are some genuinely, like, terrifying moments, especially when you get to the more difficult segments, and there's one of those big, giant things that the only thing I can sort of have it a metaphor is like the tank in Left 4 Dead, but you just hear this piercing cry from across the level, and the music changes to bum 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 bum, and you're like, whoa, what just happened? And so somebody's like, oh my god, it's huge, and you're like, what is it? Are you there? Hello? Oh my god, he's gone! No, his mic fell on the ground. He's okay. So anyway, I thought it was fun, but I'm gonna wait for it to become a little more baked before I play it some more.
I think I'm probably in that boat as well. I think it was good to see it in alpha because it has a lot of promise as a product. I think this is something I could really enjoy for a round-based sort of thing. Perhaps more than the other game I've been playing, World of Warships.
That's like a shame game.
Because you hate yourself a little bit.
Yeah.
It blows time. It's pretty decent. In the sense that if you pay wargaming money, you're basically feeding, an evil corporate empire.
You're feeding a business monetary plan that hurts gamers. It's like Jon Stewart on Crossfire. You're hurting America. Like, don't do that. All right. Anyway,
yeah. Other than that,
I've been having a lot of fun playing Mad Max, and I wanted to share this with you because I had one of those moments when you're playing a game and you're like, this is this completely organic thing. So I was playing Mad Max and I was off gathering some scrap somewhere, and I got out, and this like crazy raider just popped out of nowhere, and I'm like, holy crap, and he like clipped me with his car, and he's coming around for other paths, so I'm running back to my car to try and get to it in time, and this is what happens. Whoa. What?
You get hit by the car.
A little bit. Oh, he drove off the cliff. I lured him off the cliff. And I did it by accident.
Oh, that's beautiful. But that was a true Mad Max moment.
It was. And there have been other times where I've like shoved them off cliffs. Like there's like a cliff on my left, and I like slam into them so hard they go flying off the cliff. Those are great too. But I mentioned that in part because I have also been doing a lot of streaming on YouTube. Whether some people may have noticed, like 3 or 4 at a time. I know that Twitch is where everybody goes, but the problem with YouTube streaming was that there was no discoverability in there. Like on Twitch, you can just click on somebody playing Europa Universalis 4, or somebody playing Mad Max, somebody playing Metal Gear Solid 5, and you'll see a huge list of people playing, and you can choose from among them. And you could never do that with YouTube until now. They have this gaming.youtube.com thing that they haven't done a huge amount of promotion with.
The best you could hope for on YouTube was related videos, which were never at the same time as the stream.
Yeah.
It was always just the like secondary algorithmic check.
But so I've been doing a lot with that, and from the perspective of somebody who actually does streaming, I love the YouTube one so much more than the Twitch one. There's a lot of tools from my perspective that are better. The audience isn't there, obviously. But what that means is that when I stream, I can be like the number 2 guy on any game I pick. If I just be like, hey, anybody in the Legacy community want to watch? And now I'm like, boom, number 2.
Oh my God, you have 10 viewers on YouTube.
Exactly. So I'm trying out. But one of the things is, you can, while streaming, just click a highlight button and go back like 12 seconds, stop and say, this is where I want it to start and this is where I want it to stop. And bam, it just uploaded to my channel. Just cut that clip right out and it was good to go. I like that. That was great. So that's been really cool. So if you guys do want to check that out, there's a link in the show notes. And I didn't put the show note link in the chat yet, but it is in the description on YouTube. And here is the link for the people on Twitch. So check that out, and if you go to that link that's in the show notes there, you can like add the streaming video version of my profile, because now they have this thing like subscribers and favorites, and they're 2 different things on YouTube. Favorites are streamers on YouTube that you follow. Subscribers are videos, and if you're a subscriber to the Sound Strategy Network channel that I run, you don't get notified when I go on air, and vice versa. It's weird. They've broken it apart, which is probably a good thing, but they haven't advertised exactly how that's working yet. But anyway, I digress. What else have I been doing? Mad Max has been fun. Metal Gear Solid 5, we don't have enough time for me to explain why I hate that game. But the other thing I wanted to mention is that 11/22...
But you got to kill a helicopter with a helicopter.
I did not get to do that. I did get to knock out my horse with an airdrop supply on a parachute. That was unexpected. But anyway, I also just recently read Stephen King's 11/22/63. It's not a new book. It came out in, I think, 2012 or something like that. It's about the assassination of John F. Kennedy and a guy who goes back in time to stop it because he finds this weird time like portal that takes him back to 1958. I was churning through this book. I was sucked into this book. And for like 2 nights straight, I just stayed up until like 2 a.m. on a night that I have to get up at 5 to go to work, 5:30 to go to work. And at the end, it totally let me down. Like, I was pulling for this guy to accomplish what he set out to do. He, just by the skin of his teeth, manages to accomplish it because the past is obdurate. That's a new word that I have learned, because in this book they repeat that a lot, meaning it's basically stubborn. The past doesn't want to change. But anyway.
It's a lot like the... how have I forgotten the name now? There's the author who does all like World War II, people going back through time. the past doesn't want to be changed, kind of. Yeah.
Whatever. Oh, I've not heard of that one. There's an alternate history series of World War II books by Harry Turtledove that I've read, and those are their own thing. But anyway, that's a sci-fi connection. The problem is, as sucked into this as I was, the whole experience was ruined by the end of the book, because it was basically like this weird bait and switch where the character finally finishes getting what they want, and then they didn't want it anymore because it turned out to be horrible. Like, the past is like, oh, so you did change something. Well, screw you. Go back to the future and find out what happened. Oh, horrible earthquakes and all this terrible, destructive nonsense. So now he has to go back to the past to fix what he did wrong, and he just winds up in the same shitty future. Like, oh, that just undid all of the enjoyment I got out of the book, and now I have to tell you not to read it. So anyway, that's a thing.
Yeah, quick comment. People are seeing a desync over here on YouTube between the voice and the picture. Are we seeing that on Twitch as well from our few Twitch viewers? That's a good question.
They said they refreshed it and it's working.
Because I'm looking at it now, and I'm definitely seeing that same desync they're talking about.
Sorry about that, guys. I'm not sure what's causing that.
Apparently a refresh may fix it, at least temporarily.
All right. Well, yes. If it keeps on keeping on, let us know. I'll try to do a reset on my side. But for now, the last thing I wanted to mention is that I'm listening, for those of you who may or may not be fans of The Name of the Wind, which is a really, really good book. It's actually a series called The Kingkiller Chronicles. And Patrick Rothfuss is the author, and he's doing a podcast now called Untitled Rothfuss Project. I have a link in the show notes. It is phenomenal. If you like, the two dudes talking format podcast, these guys are really interesting. It's Patrick Rothfuss, who is this fairly large celebrity within fantasy authors, and the guy who created Cards Against Humanity. It's Max something. I can't remember his last name at the moment. But so they have these very interesting conversations when they're, they did one where they were at Gen Con, and they talk about all this sort of behind the scenes stuff, and it's really, really cool. So I liked it a lot. I was just going to recommend it. Now we're moving on to the Star Citizen stuff. Finally. Sorry, I know people get upset.
Confirmation,
when we don't.
Twitch seems fine. It's apparently a YouTube bug.
Okay.
So, sorry folks on YouTube.
That's good to hear.
There's not a whole lot we can do about that.
The good news is the audio podcast is being recorded separately, so that will not have that. So, let's go to the bite-sized data analysis. There were just a couple of things that I wanted to point out that I found this particular week, or the last few weeks. This is really interesting. This is somebody showing off sort of the new damage system and how it looks visually. And man, that is cool looking. Like, it doesn't just do the lazy thing that most games do and say, oh, this is taking damage somewhere in this vicinity. Just make it look damage
putting
over
holes
there.
Through that wing.
Yeah. And
that's pretty neat.
And what's more, it's just the dynamic fact that it's responding to the exact locations that are being hit. That I love that. It's really cool. So that's one thing that's like this attention to detail piece that I found that was really cool. But then the other thing that I found that was all about like this attention to detail was somebody found this series of they went into ArtCorp and they found I'm not sure which shop this is that has
Puppy Blast.
There you go.
This is Puppy Blast.
Sells all the guns. And they're like, huh, that's interesting. And they got a little closer and they're like, hey, wait a minute, what is that? And they got closer. Yeah, look at that. You can actually see the rifling inside the barrel of this gun. And that's fairly incredible because not many of them do that. I mean, you can also see the horrible aliasing on the low-res texture on the right, but that's a huge attention to detail. That's pretty cool. Now, somebody else was like, I wonder if they physically rotate the bullet due to the rifle. I'm like, no, they don't go that far.
No.
No, they don't do that.
It's still pretty cool.
Somebody else said, for a lot of attention to detail, there are no pegs holding these guns up. And somebody else is like, no, it's space magnets. Its future is filled with space magnets.
Lobster sticks to magnet. Everyone knows this.
Yes, exactly. So those were some things that caught my attention. And let's see, some other things that caught my attention. The Community Hub is out, obviously. We've seen some things there. You can see it right here. It's it's interesting. I'm going to try to come here a little more often and see what kind of things get, upvoted, I guess would be the right way. The Lego P-52 Merlin is pretty cool. So there's a lot of interesting things here. I'm just going to try and keep an eye on this over the next week or so, like daily, just go and check it out and see what's there and keep some links if there's anything worth checking out. And of course, there's also the podcast section.
Yeah, thanks to those who've already upvoted us on that. We do appreciate it. We'd love to see more.
Yep, we've got solid 21 blackjack. So we could either get like a boatload more upvotes or just stay right here and win.
42, Bridger. You gotta have 42.
Yeah, let's get to 40. Yeah, so this is an island of stability here at 21. Let's get to 42, and then we can stay there. And if we get enough upvotes to be like 100, then we can stop at 100 because that's a nice round number. My OCD is showing. Okay, so yeah, give us an upvote if you like the show. Moving on, here's an interesting quote that I found, and this is courtesy of the INN dev chat over at imperialnews.network. And this is from Matt Sherman at CIG. He says, "Don't make any assumptions off the current data since plenty is going to change once physically based damage goes in. Any assumptions made before that should be immediately considered wrong." And this is something that we have been saying on the show for a long time. Physically based damage system is going to change everything. Don't worry about balance right now. The game is incomplete. And when this happens, it's going to get unbalanced. No matter how close to balance we get it right now, as soon as we put physically based damage in, it topples the apple cart.
I'd really love to add this to the GIF that somebody made on Reddit of the chick in the cutlass flipping people off.
Yeah.
If I could combine that image with the finger, I would have the response to 98% of the worst arguments in this game.
Yeah.
Now, there's plenty of arguments this wouldn't cover, but 98% of the bad ones would be covered by that GIF.
Here's what I think we need to do. I think we need to choose a new or interesting or recently updated game that's come out recently, right? Every month we'll choose a new one, and we'll say, stop arguing, go play X. Right? Because the reason that people are here on the internet arguing over stupid details is because they don't have the game and they want the game, and that frustrates them, and that leads to these things.
To be clear, we all want this game so badly, except for Derek Smart, that we are arguing over minutia.
Right. That's actually a good sign most of the time. If your forums are filled with people arguing and actually like vomiting up bile over this stuff and just like, well, that's because you're a Nazi, like just invoking Godwin's law left and right, that's actually a good sign sometimes about the passion of your community.
I'm not sure Space Hitler is ever a good sign, Bridger. Never.
Okay, fine. But anyway, yes, so that's a thing. And what else? I linked something else in Slack chat, and now I can't remember what it was, but it's too late now.
Alas.
There's a lot of interesting things been going on recently, but none of them is interesting.
There is a design post coming up in this next week about the flight model.
Yes!
Calix? I forgot how I pronounce his name pronounced. Made a post on the forums about that a couple days ago. It does look like we are in for a major deep dive on the flight model. And the idea of a rear engine centric flight model is still in the works. So for those of you who are dissatisfied with the current flight model, the fact that you seem to be able to spin on a dime, that your back engines don't seem to do too much, apparently that is changing. And it is changing soon. That's going to be a big shakeup, because the way that people are learning to fly right now will be drastically altered if the rear engines become incredibly strong compared to the maneuvering thrusters, which apparently may be in the works.
Yeah.
So, hey, look this next week. I think he was saying it was either Tuesday or Thursday. It was a T name. They were at least hoping to have something out. It was making its way through the Ben Hammer and the rest of the PR apparatus to make sure it was what they wanted to release. I'm excited. I'm curious to actually see what comes out of this.
I have to say, if they nailed the flight model perfectly the first time, I would have been really surprised. And I think a lot of people have
an entire closet full of hats.
A lot of people have been a little. Everybody has their own nitpicky thing that's wrong with this, flight model, right? And it might all have, some sort of root cause that they're going to dig out and say, once we fix this thing, then it's going to fix a lot of these other ancillary problems. It's like treating the actual cause rather than the symptoms that people feel when they're playing. But yeah, we'll definitely see that. It's just for the next 6 to 12 months, we're going to see a lot of waiting and then big changes and a lot of waiting again. And that's just going to be a rocky road until we get to a much more stable, more complete version of the game's combat, systems in space and on the ground. And I feel like those are the two pieces that people are going to care about the most. Like, if they iterate a couple of times on how exactly mining works or how exactly crafting works, they're not nearly going to get as much trouble caused by people right now, like concern threads and things, as people do right now about the flight model and about Star Marine, etc., things like that.
Yeah. Shout out quickly to Michael Klassen in chat. It is Kalix, apparently.
Oh, okay.
So, thank you for that, Michael.
Well, that answered that question. All right, so the next piece here that we have to talk about is the spectrum analysis. This is when we take one of the in-fiction stories that are on robertspaceindustries.com and we talk about it here as a sort of a book club. And we've done this for a couple of them so far, and the stories are usually quite good. There have been some that we liked more than others, of course. And this is the next one in the series that we're doing, so definitely check those out if you haven't done that before. But Orbital Supermax is essentially a Prison Break story, for all intents and purposes, but it's it's fairly. I felt it was very interesting. There were some things that I was highly critical of, and there were other things that I thought were brilliant. But what is your overall impression there, Gray?
So,
without going into spoilers,
my overall
I will say
impression is actually there's a lot of vacuum actually playing into this game or into this story. I think this is the first one we've discussed where space itself is scary, which is a pretty cool thing. I actually like the fact that instead of it just being, space Han Solo, space Star Wars, let's fly around through space, the spaceships are effectively the person in many cases. This one, it is very personal, and space is a very scary thing. We get people blown out into space and dying and all sorts of horrible things happening. That's a pretty cool detail for them to actually be able to, play with from the semi-realistic, at least entertaining model here. And I give the author credit for making this, Jordan Ellinger, making this a little bit more personally focused rather than ship focused. Though there are a couple cool ships.
Yeah, the other thing is that the protagonist in this is very different in the same way that a human perspective, the protagonist was very different from the other stories. The other stories were basically like pulp adventure stories. Like, you're following around the equivalent of a darker Han Solo in Tales of Kid Crimson. You're following around like a typical sort of hero in Cassandra's Tears, right? The hot shot pilot.
Someone's going to come out and tell us that there is an exact Prison Break story character that this guy is based off of at some point. But
it might be.
This is original.
Well, no, it's not original. It's just less cliched. There's less hero in this, or anti, like the other ones I described are like hero and anti-hero. But in a human perspective, it's just a guy going about his day. Like, he's not super special. He's actually down on his luck and kind of weird. Like, he's eccentrically, he doesn't really like humans. He likes to hang around with bandos, like asocial. Like, he's a very different protagonist than you're used to in these kinds of short stories. And this story is similar. You have a guy who's just this, he's definitely, in his younger days, he would have been considered like a hero. Like, he was a hotshot pilot at the academy, but then something horrible happened and he never flew again. And now and it's not a story of how he regained his confidence and became a hotshot pilot again. Like, he kind of does that, but the story isn't about that, which is something that I thought was good.
No, it definitely does. I agree. It definitely does have a nice, different feel to it.
So let's sort of go through it a little bit chapter by chapter and discuss what, our thoughts were. So at the beginning, we started chapter 1, and he's basically being interviewed. Our hero, Nyland, is that Avery? Am I getting that right? Avery Nyland.
Sounds about right.
He is being interviewed by the psychologist, Dr. Kayla Wyrick. And the names are important. Is it Wyrick? Maybe it's Wyrick. So our protagonist, our quote unquote hero here, is essentially been busted. He used to work at the Orbital Supermax. Now he's a prisoner because he was busted for essentially stealing medical supplies and selling them to the prisoners for, I don't know what, cigarettes? I don't exactly know what went down there. They didn't explain it. But so that is all interesting, and I thought, oh, this is going to be a very interesting sort of drama about the workings of the prison system and politics, and then boom, it just changes into a nope, it's not that at all. The prison just got attacked, and now you have to find your way out, and there's this thing blown in the side. It's like, whoa, that's a completely different story than I was expecting. So it kind of sucked me in a little bit there, right at the beginning.
Even more interesting about this, not to spoil too much in the later chapters, is that we're catching him right as he's been arrested and processed, effectively.
Yeah, we skip the whole part of what happened to him, but they don't really explain it, which is fine.
But it's also not like he's been a hardened prisoner or someone who's been in there for a while. And blah, blah, blah. This is somebody who just got caught and just got basically sent here, which plays in later with his whole records and everything else.
Yeah.
But it gives that interesting perspective that you walk into a world that's already started changing, even in this first chapter, for this character.
I got the impression that he had worked at this station specifically and was busted for smuggling.
I think so. But I mean, he just got basically transferred from one to the, from in charge to a prisoner.
So anyway, the all hell breaks loose, and this woman, this doctor, he is with her. Basically, the command thing gets destroyed. The command module that had all the highest ranking people, like the warden and the person in charge of the prison, it gets smashed in the very opening paragraphs of the story. And this doctor, who's a civilian but has the pay grade of a lieutenant, becomes the acting highest ranking personnel on the prison, which is a little, because this prison seems to be really big. Like, if all of the commanders like all of the highest ranking people were in there, it seems a little odd.
Yeah, but this seems like the one moment where I kind of have to suspend my disbelief that they'd cluster everyone in one spot.
Maybe they were having a conference or something. I don't know. They did mention that
security conference about how they shouldn't clump up in one place.
He did mention that it was a very, very well-timed raid. Like, they did it. It was very precision strike. Like, they hit the command thing, and they the actual defenses, the missile defenses, didn't boot up to stop the incoming missile. So it seems like the people that were attacking had some help on the inside. So maybe the person who had helped them on the inside got all of the commanders into the place, and then signaled them and said, "Now's the time. Hit the command hub," and then everybody's dead.
That would do it. That would do it.
So we go into chapter 2. And the protagonist is like, I'm not hero material, but I know where to find some. There's this like highly decorated, person that used to be an officer in the UEE, but now he's in prison because he went mercenary or something like that.
They don't want to talk about what he did.
No,
which is also another interesting,
because it's all blacked out, right? He can't look at the records and see what it says. It's just all redacted.
The interesting part about this story, at least from a continuation perspective, we've talked about some of the other ones, Tales of Kid Crimson. Are we going to see more of these? This one, they branch off. They give us a few different characters we can follow, and, Mr. Black Ops here is definitely one of them.
Yeah, he reminds me of Mr. Clark from the, what do they call him? The Hunt for Red October and all those Tom Clancy books that follow Jack Ryan. Like, he's just this super special ops guy that just, anytime you need something horrible done, he's the guy. Like, that's what he seems like.
The Deus Ex Machina that just does terrible things.
Yeah. And they use the word fascia a lot, and I'm like, I've never heard of this word, and I had to Google it. It means, like, it has two meanings. One has to do with biology, and the other one has to do with, like, sort of a facade on the side of a wall. And I get the impression now that I've read this word that, like, so this is like a weird metallic, like, sheet metal skin that's on all of these walls in here, as the interior of the walls of the hallway as you're going around. It's not space worthy, but the thing behind it is. And it's like boiling because this plastic fascia is like there's some kind of horrible heat problem because there's a fire somewhere because of the attack, and it's a very interesting word. Now, here's something very interesting, because as they're going to get these prisoners, the doctor starts to sound like the Doctor from Doctor Who to me. She uses just a little bit of persuasion, and just saying a few words just completely turns the tables on these guys that were just about to probably kill them, and gets them to instead help her and
she's their psychologist, right?
Yeah.
That's the trick.
Right.
She knows all the stuff.
Right, but in the way that she did it, it felt like I was reading a scene from Doctor Who, and that she was the doctor in that situation, and she is a doctor of psychology. So I'm like, I wonder if they're doing this on purpose. I'm just gonna keep reading and see. And there were some more parallels as we went on. So they managed to get to the armory. They get some more inmates to follow them with her expertise, convincing them that it's in their best interest, basically. And they go to the flight deck and they meet these pirates that attacked them, including Martin Kilkenny. Is that a real last name? I've never heard
Apparently
any last
it is
name like
now.
that. I'm going to type that into Google and see what happens.
He's Kilkenny.
Right?
Nothing.
Yes, I got it. Oh, there's actually a city in the Republic of Ireland is called Kilkenny. But I'm sure it's pronounced like that and not Kilkenny.
Kilkenny.
But I think it's Kilkenny. Like the first 4 letters are their own syllable, and then any after, that's probably how it goes. Now, once I saw it was Irish, I'm like, oh, that makes sense if you pronounce it that way. Okay, so anyway, the Nova Dogs is a pirate organization that are cannibals. And that's interesting.
Yeah. Now, I'm wondering, are we going to see this kind of thing in the main game then? Are they setting up basically the idea that we're going to have pirates that don't really want your cargo? They just want to murder the crap out of you.
They'll sell your cargo in order to make their ships better so that they can eat people.
Yes.
More, I guess.
Or
is like cannibalism a side project, and like they are just normal pirates, but if they happen to come across people, they'll shoot them and eat them.
Are they that poor? Is this a question of they can't afford food and supplies? So
no, it's like somebody they basically got an accountant who was like, we do leave this biological material every time we attack. We could use that. Just some guy, and he sold the guy on. Yes, that'll work great. We have to be efficient.
New org idea: Donner Party.
No. A lot of not very well-read people are going to be confused by that. Go look it up on Google. Type in Donner Party.
Go look up the Donner Party. We'll wait.
Yeah, we'll wait. It's something everybody should know so that you can get referential humor on a weird podcast on the internet. So there are some interesting things here. One thing that first occurred to me is that after they meet Kilkenny, there's sort of the doctor and our hero and the super badass mercenary guy sort of hang back, and the other inmates are like, let's go blast him. And so now the doctor is sort of arguing with our hero, who's like, we'll just leave him and go. Like, we got to get out of here.
Yeah.
And the doctor's like, no, we can't. We have to help them. And normally this is like a cliche thing, like, oh yes, the woman is empathetic and she says, we can't leave somebody behind. Like it's either the woman or like this hardened soldier that says, I never leave a man behind. Like those are the two tropes, the two stereotypes. But in this, the author went on to explain, like, the reason that she has such a connection to these inmates is because she's their psychologist. She knows these people. She has worked with them multiple, like, times a week for months at a time. Like, she knows their story, she knows them, and she knows their vulnerabilities, and she knows them as humans, not just prisoners, right? Yes. So they humanized her rather than just making her the woman who's empathetic and doesn't want people to die, which I liked. I really liked that.
And beyond that, they did actually allow for there to be a more cynical take on it, too. Quote, it doesn't help us if Kilkenny kills Cronach, one of the prisoners who's leading the other people to this fight, without a fight.
Yes.
So he's actually saying, well, that doesn't really, one way or the other, these people may die.
Right, because the proposition
but we need to make them into effective cannon fodder.
Yeah, the proposition that was starting is, okay, let's go ahead and leave them, let them kill each other, and then she was like, we can't do that for her reasons, and then there's also the one you gave, which is, right now they're walking into a trap. we need to make them effective cannon fodder. I like that. That's gotta be a good band name, right? Effective cannon fodder. Or perhaps...
Well, there we go, Bridger. Now
good
we have
org name
for our band in the persistent universe.
Yeah.
Because clearly we need to rule the airwaves as a talk show and a prog rock group.
Yeah, sure. So anyway, they meet the Nova Dogs, these cannibal pirates, and they're here looking for a very specific person. And I should have realized it. I mean, spoilers, people. If you're listening to this and you haven't read the thing and you're worried about spoilers, you've got a problem. So I should have realized that our hotshot mercenary Black Ops guy was the person they were looking for, especially when
Shocker.
they couldn't...
Right there.
They couldn't turn it up. But for some reason, it never occurred to me until the end. He's like, I know who they're looking for. And I'm like, oh, of course. Like, it took way too long for it to appeal. I just assumed that there was, like, somebody that just was, like, in the background. Like, we don't know. We're not going to know. It's just a reason they're there, and that's an ancillary thing. But, of course, with these kinds of stories, you've already met the person involved. Like, in every, detective show on TV, you're like, gee, I wonder who the murderer is going to be this week. Well, there were 3 people that were introduced in this episode that were not recurring characters. It's going to be one of them. And in the first 20 minutes, they say, oh, well, it's definitely not that guy. And in the second, 10 minutes, then it's not that guy. Well, now we figured out it's the third guy. Almost every time. So, yes. So there's that. They have a little firefight. We find out that Martin Kilkenny has a god complex. And he just...
Shocker.
Yeah, he's got a plan, and there's a trap, and they just barely get out with a few of those prisoners with them. And then the story takes a weird turn.
The sawing the Hornet thing.
Oh,
that's
yeah,
an interesting detail. Sawing out the hydraulic line on the landing gear.
Yeah.
Causes the Hornet's front end to tip downward.
That seems...
Question number 1. Can I do this in the persistent universe? Question number 2. Can I use that to crush someone?
I'm just going to guess. I'm going to go take a look at, let's say, an F-18. F-18 front landing gear. You know what I don't see?
Hydraulic lines?
I don't think I see any hydraulic lines. I mean, it's possible that some of these lines here are hydraulic lines, but they don't look easy to cut. I think they are mostly metal.
Well, let's take a look at the Star Citizen Hornet landing gear.
Okay. I was using an actual F-18, but that could help. This is not an F-18. This is not a Hornet in the context of the game.
I'm not sure, looking at these photos, that I see any sign of hydraulic lines. So maybe... Oh, no, there they are. Super Hornet has hydraulic lines going out along the edge of it to the foot on the side. I can't see the front in this photo, but each of these Hornets does appear to have hydraulic lines. That or it's weird electrical lines that would have no purpose going into a solid metal foot.
Yeah. But no matter which way you slice it, it was a little bit of a, like, really? Why would the hydraulics default to, like, give out if there was a failure? Like, the thing... Any engineer is like...
It's probably a pressure question.
There's actually 2 different ways that you can fail. You can fail safe, or you can fail deadly. Like, those are literally the 2. That's like, everybody says, oh, there's a fail safe. When you say fail safe, what that means is if this thing were to break, you want it to break in a way that it would be safe. Now, if your hydraulics failed and the result was your ship crushes the mechanic who's underneath it, that's called failing deadly. That is not good. Okay, so to me, that suggests that the author might not be familiar with engineering, but it was just
but that's also how it seems to be modeled in the game.
That's true.
So we'll see.
Yeah. So that was an interesting thing, but it happened, and they used it as a sort of Deus Ex Machina. We have to save the day here, and then they got out.
Thank you for not butchering that like I did, by the way.
You're welcome. So let's see. So the doctor, the doctor turns down a gun when offered one. Another Doctor Who-ish type move. And then it also occurred to me while they're in this, is like, this is kind of like an escort mission. If you're like, I was like thinking of this like a game. Like, this is an escort mission. Like, the doctor is completely helpless at this point. Like, she came up and like saved the day in a cutscene earlier by convincing them with a few words to join her. But like now there's an actual firefight and she's useless, but she's also super important. Like if she dies, the mission fails and you have to restart. Only you can't restart because this isn't the game. So it definitely felt like an escort mission as I was reading it. But anyway, they move on, they go into the server room, and they have this weird interaction with the protagonist and the doctor, where the doctor's like, I know you're going to hide the thing that got you arrested, and are you really sure you should do it? This is a test. Don't blow it. And then he, like, does it, and she, like, looks at him and shakes his head. I'm like, what is this? Is some weird reverse psychology shit going on. I don't know. What was your reaction to that whole section?
Which one? Sorry,
This is the part where in the server room and he's like, oh, I could wipe out my record because those records weren't sent to the UEE, and this would completely clear me of my crime. And she like somehow subtly knows that's why he wants her code. And it's just this weird interaction that I didn't like from a reader's perspective.
You know, I felt like the only reason that was included, genuinely, was so that they could make this character do other things in the future. Like
the protagonist?
Yes, so that this would become a reusable character. Outside of the context of prison breaks. I'm not sure whether we'll see more of this story or more of this character, but this felt like their way of making sure that he was reusable.
Okay.
So
yeah, I mean, he does kind of
to necessarily fit with the rest of the story or the context. It does provide them the ability to reuse the character, and it does actually lead to another question, which is, if you're in game and there's a prison break, are you going to be able to possibly clean your record?
Yeah, there you go.
Mean, this could have been. I could see a lot of this fiction being used as a storyboard, a testing ground for what mechanics can we brainstorm. This might be one of their brainstorming things. I mean, it could just be a chapter that was a little bit awkward. It could be a chapter where the writing didn't quite click with you. I'm going to give this author the benefit of the doubt and try to say, one, this is possibly a mechanic that they're brainstorming, and two, this is a way for them to keep the character alive as a lawful protagonist moving forward.
I mean, the other interesting thing that you pointed out is that this does do something important for later in the story. He vows, basically the character, like, yeah, I let her down now, but I had to expunge my record, but he, like, vows to himself, like, I'll make it up to her. And, like, later in the story, he does stupid crap just to win her respect back. And in part, I think that's because of this moment. Like, he feels like he let her down. In a sense, he partly let himself down. Like, he cares about what she thinks of him because she is sort of as a psychologist, she's sort of there to judge almost, right?
It's true.
And to try and make him see the sort of the better side, the side of his better angels, essentially.
In some way, she acts as sort of conscience to him throughout the story, which is an interesting role. It actually isn't a badly written character that way.
Now, Vin in the Twitch chat, I should point out, Vin is another member of Legacy Gaming, and he actually is a pilot in the U.S. military, and he says that the Hornet can propel itself using its wheels. That's, and this is something that never occurred to me, that allows it to drive around the flight deck without killing people. Because if you imagine it trying to use its jets to get from point A to point B, I guess that's true. That's
so great.
Never occurred to me. So some of those lines that we saw on the actual real life Hornet were probably maybe fuel lines. I don't know if exactly what in the wheels it uses to turn them. I don't know. Maybe there's a small electrical generator, but I feel like you'd have to have a really powerful electrical generator to pull something like that. I don't know how that works.
Maybe. I'd imagine you get some pretty solid torque out of a good electric motor in there if you're careful.
Maybe. All right, anyway.
Note, Vin is Whitesnake is Legacy Instructional Series. Go watch the Legacy Instructional Series. It's available on his channel and on INN. It's great. It's amazing for your flight.
But unfortunately, as we've mentioned, everything is going to change and it's going to be completely obsolete. I feel so bad for him because he's done so much to make these great videos teaching people how to fly with the current game mechanics, and it's gonna all go wrong. There's a reason that I haven't launched a beta boot camp yet. Like, I was gonna do something similar to that, but I wanted to wait until we have a mostly finished game, essentially, before I throw that together. Anyway, so they finally figure out what they're going to do. They find out that this guy, Martin Browning, is the prisoner that they're here, that the bad guys, the pirates, are here looking for. We don't know why, but we know that he's offered clemency to anybody who, the pirate has offered clemency to anyone who can bring him or give him the who actual Martin Browning is, their actual name. Basically, he said, you can have a spot on my crew. Everybody else is going to be dinner. For all intents and purposes, that's what he said. And they're arguing about, well, maybe once he gets this guy, he'll just leave after taking a couple of people. And they're like, no, he'll blow it out of the sky. You don't know that, and all this other stuff. And that's another part where the protagonist is trying to wrestle. Like, if we found this guy, maybe we should just give it to him, and maybe he'll just leave the station alone and we'll be fine. But the others don't believe that, and so he decides not to do it. Even though they go searching for it, they can't find this guy in the server. And as we alluded to earlier, it turns out it's this super Black Ops mercenary that's with them that's going by a
hidden section.
Yeah, he's got a different name. So then we move on to the next piece. And that is where they come up with this plan. So their original plan was get to the flight deck, use the fighters that are on there to make their way off the station. But by the time they get to the flight deck, it's too late. The pirates are already there, and that's where the fight happens. So now
they have to go find the mothballed stuff.
Yeah, there's an old transport and a Cutlass and an old Hornet that are mothballed on the cargo section of the space station, and they're trying to get there, but they can't go there without the super duper awesome mechanic that has a horrible head injury that makes him lose all impulse control and slash women to death. It's just this weird horror story section. Like, the tone of the story takes on this very, very horror element where the people, like all the hardened prisoners, see the red tape on the door and they're like, I'm not going in there. That's for the forensic prisoners. Those are the freaking crazy ones. Like, the hardened people that are like, maximum security, yeah, we can go through there. We know those guys. Like, no, those guys are freaking crazy. You do not go in there. So that was interesting. I don't know. How did you like that section?
You know, it was an interesting element to it. It suggested that there are, at least so far as this universe is concerned, still stigmas surrounding mental health, still this idea of, you know, there are the super crazy ones and the people that are completely driven space mad, or whatever you want to call it, space crazy. I think that it was an interesting way to introduce what you could call a broken character to. Being able to create that sort of characterization, that sort of diversity of people in this, I think actually lent an air of credibility to a lot more of the, you know, far-fetched, oh, we're going to unmothball a ship and go fly off somewhere and that kind of thing. And for that matter, it does suggest that, you know, in-game, dealing with the advocacy, have we talked about the story where the advocacy spaced a dude yet? Has that been a thing?
I don't think we've done that one yet, no. Is that the law one?
That's the law one.
No, we haven't done the law one.
Okay, well, we'll get to that. But yeah, there's clearly these like levels of criminality that increase throughout this. And, you know, Mr. I'm the quartermaster who's smuggling medical supplies to prisoners is pretty much bottom of the barrel. Black Ops McGee is pretty high up there, but he's still just in prison rather than, you know, out in airlock somewhere. And then you've got this mechanic. That's an interesting thing. Starting to get into this idea of Herbie. This idea of mental health and this idea that there are characters and there are people in this universe who aren't the perfect Star Trek universe of, you know,
happy-go-lucky people that have their own strengths and this and that.
Or even Star Wars. I don't see a whole lot of the mental illness, the crazy ward in Star Wars at this point either, which now that you've got this whole area, you know, they're setting a gritty universe here. I like that. I think that it's good that they went a little bit further and said, hey, we have these people that are having real problems, and they're in this secret part of the prison, and oh, by the way, you don't want to go in there.
All right, we're having somebody in the Twitch chat that's suggesting that the Hornet itself does not have the ability to drive around without its main engines. Vin is still skeptical. The real life F-18 Hornet, yes. But there seems to be some disagreement. So maybe don't take our previous statement as the word of, knowledge.
The word of truth.
The word of truth. Okay, so anyway, they basically find this really, really super awesome mechanic guy that had a horrible injury where something was lodged in his brain and it destroyed his impulse control, and so he went on like a horrible serial killing spree, just murdering women, and that's why he's in the hospital here. But our mercenary hero guy knows him, and he's like, if he stays with me, I can keep him in control, blah, blah, blah. And they head off for the actual cargo place where they're going to find these things. Yeah. And they actually meet up with some engineers who went there to hide, some actual people who work at the station.
As a quick note, just on the murdering thing, this does set an interesting, I won't say precedent, but concept. Mm-hmm. You might be able to kill a whole lot of people and have your character just sent to prison and be able to break out. Rather than the advocacy just completely wrecking you. But continue, anyway.
That's true. So as they're on their way to this thing, they meet the Tevarin terrorist. And this is a guy who essentially tried to genocide the human race by putting what was a sort of a slow-acting biological weapon of mass destruction to infect people in a terminal, a space virus, basically, yeah. And then they were going to, get off and go to their, all these different planets and spread the virus, but it had an incubation time of long enough so that they would get to where they're going before they had any symptoms, and they would spread it around and nobody would know where it started, and it didn't matter because now it was all over the place. But the UE got wind of it and they shut it down and they locked this guy up in this prison. Now, the first thing that happens when we meet our badass Black Ops guy, the Wes Morgan, is he lets this guy out. And that's all it was. He let him out, and he's like, I'm going to let him out. And they're like, you can't let him out. He's a genocidal maniac. He tried to kill the human race. And he's like, listen, I'm going to let him out. And he's like, okay, but you can't help him get off this station. He's like, fine, I'm not going to help him get off this station. And he's basically let the guy out and say, you're out and you're on your own. And the Tevarin guy's like, thanks, Wes. And you're like, what? This is some interesting history between these characters. I want to know why he thinks he owes this Tevarin genocidal terrorist a favor. Exactly.
See, again, this story, for all of its, crazy MacGyvering and all that, is far and away my favorite setup for a bunch of other stories and a bunch of other characters.
Yeah.
Because I agree. I want to know. I want to hear more about this. I want a prequel. I want to hear why he owes this Tevarin.
Yeah, and so we don't ever find out why, but then they come back and they meet the Tevarin again, and essentially sort of talk their way out of it, and the Tevarin, though, only will let them go if they leave the doctor there, because she has the clearances that they need to try to survive against the pirates, right? The Tevarin has got his own little band of prisoners that he's broken out, and they've all got weapons. And I think a lot of them are Tevarin, if I'm not mistaken. Like, this whole wing is filled with Tevarin, species.
The Xeno wing.
The Xeno wing, yeah. So, the doctor is forced to be kept there, and then they let the rest go. And, the main character feels horrible about that. And he's like, but there's literally nothing he can do and nothing anybody else can do because there were way more of them, and they had all the guns and they were disarmed when they were brought there, so they had no choice. They just had to keep on. And, the Tevarin says, okay, you can, or she says, you can go and just let the UEE know to send somebody here as soon as you get out, and then they'll come get me. And that seems to be the plan. So they get to the actual cargo place with the ships that are mothballed, and the mechanic that they picked up, plus a couple of extra engineer guys that they've found along the way, also start working on this, and then they find out they have another problem. There's no fuel in these things. They have a little bit of fuel, and they need a lot more fuel. And the fuel is all stored on the hangar deck.
Fuel mechanics!
Yeah, fuel mechanics. It drives interesting drama. So the fuel is actually all stored on the actual hangar deck, which is controlled by the pirates, and there's 100 pirates, so there's no way they can get through there. So they figure out, okay, but this station has maneuvering thrusters, and we can get to one of those maneuvering thrusters. They have this big, giant thing of fuel, and we can just siphon some of that out. Luckily, I assume that means in the future, there's all kinds of standards for what nozzles look like.
You can suck all of the fuel through a tube.
Yeah,
This is always the case.
Just like real life.
Yeah.
So Anyway, they try to sneak through the command section to get to where they're going, and it turns out the bad guy figured out how to get the guns working, because now he's got these automated turrets firing at everything, and so they just barely make it out of there alive, and now they have to sneak past the pirates to get to the fuel
Some of them
instead.
get chewed up by that too.
Yeah,
throughout this
they
whole
lost
story,
a couple.
there have been a steady stream of basically unnamed prisoners getting chewed up and spit out by guns, by pirates, by you name it, just dying. So our cast here has narrowed.
Yeah. Now, there was a weird part. When they're talking with the Tavaran, there's one part of the part of the story that I liked the least, I have to say, is they're talking with the Tavaran, and am I on the right thing? No, I'm on episode 6. Let me look at 7 here. This is the part where our protagonist suddenly starts arguing to try and save the Doctor, but he has this weird internal psychoanalysis monologue where he's like, why do I even care about her? Why don't I just do what I normally do? And it's like,
it's a little forced.
It's very forced, and it would have been way better to have that as like a sort of self-analysis after the fact, where he's like, why, like he's like holding his stomach because he got hit there multiple times trying to talk, and he is basically thinking to himself, like, why did I just put myself out there? I never do that. Like, that would have been great, but it happens in the moment, and it feels like this complete break in the pacing of the story. Like, the story's going, and then we stop for a couple paragraphs while this guy has an internal conflict, but in the context of the story, it's only a couple of seconds. So how did he have this internal conflict with himself and have all these, like, why am I helping her? Well, maybe it's because of this. Well, maybe it's because of that. Well, why can't I just go back to the way that I used to work? Like, it's just this weird thing that broke the story up. That's probably the piece that I liked the least about the overall story, and I just wanted to mention that. Yeah. But anyway, that having been said, I did enjoy the story overall. We'll keep talking about it here. So they sneak past. They're trying to get to the fuel. He's actually using his old smuggler's route of going through, of course, ventilation shafts big enough to fit a person. That's always the solution. But you could say maybe this is a service shaft, and they have all kinds of conduit and various other things going through this shaft as well. Because in a space station, that's the kind of thing you need easy access to. It's just not the same as a normal terrestrial building where you just shove stuff through walls. But let's say this is a little
complicated in space, I'd imagine.
Yeah, let's say this is an access area, right? Access thing that's also doubling as ventilation. And they are essentially trying to sneak through this, and one of the prisoners gets caught. And our hero's kind of looking down through the ventilation shaft at the pirates, and one of them thought he heard something. He's coming over, and the hero's like, "Shh, don't say anything, don't." And the guy who's stuck is like panicking. He's like, I don't know if he's not claustrophobic or something, but he's just like, "Get me out of here, man! You can't leave me here!" And he starts making a bunch of noise, and the pirates down below, of course, hear this and just start firing into the ceiling where they heard the noise. So that guy gets aced pretty much immediately. Our hero and the special ops guy are further forward, and there's one more guy there as well. And our hero's like, well, there's only one thing to do, and he like just vents the ventilation shaft directly into space. Luckily, it's straight shot, straight out, and so it just launches them because they can't crawl forward fast enough to avoid these shots going up into the ceiling. So they just fire forward. That was a really cool.
This is like the second or third instance in the story of space is freaking scary because people die instantly or near instantly upon entering the vacuum. Bad things happen.
Mm-hmm. And originally I thought, well, it's going to be okay because he probably has a reaction thruster on there. But then I'm like, wait, no, this is just a regular spacesuit. It's not, it probably doesn't have a reaction. This is going to just fire him towards the planet and he's going to be gone. What the hell is going to happen? He managed to grab an antenna just barely. And I believe that we had a sort of mini review of the movie Gravity. And there's a scene in Gravity where the characters are trying to grab onto, like, I don't remember what it was, like the remnants of the International Space Station or something, right? It's like this long thing, this ragged thing that they grab onto, or so one of the characters grabs onto, and then the other character is attached to them by this long rope, right? Now the rope goes taut, and then the rest of the shot is as if the person is dangling by the rope, and the first person is holding on, and the other person is like, it's George Clooney. George Clooney has to disconnect, because if he doesn't disconnect, then he'll pull them both off. Except anybody who knows anything about how gravity and inertia works in space when you're in free fall, once he stopped moving and that thing went taut, he would have bounced backwards towards her, and there would have been no more reason to disconnect, because he would have been fine. He would have basically stopped all his momentum. If they had had this scene where he had to disconnect before the line went taut, because that would have made sense. But anyway, in this scene, they do it correctly. He grabs the antenna, somebody grabs him, and he just has a moment that he has to brace for, and then the pressure slackens because he just stopped all the acceleration.
Your vector is now 0. Life is good.
The vector is 0. Life is good. That's got to be like a bumper sticker you put on your ship.
Or life is bad. I'm not sure. Your vector hits 0, you've got a problem.
Yeah, when vector is 0, life is good. I like that. That could work. So anyway, they basically, the Black Ops mercenary and our hero, our protagonist, are the only ones that survive. The other two go flying off into space, and they are seen by the pirates and blown up again by spaceships, by space fighters. And luckily, the fighters think that's the only things that made it out of there, and they get to hide on the platform. They get to the thing, they get the fuel, they start filling up the stuff, and then our hero gets in the Cutlass and has an interesting fight where he barrel rolls around an antenna.
Oh, no.
I'm not sure they're using that in anything other than the Star Fox manner. For those of you that are confused, go look up aileron roll versus barrel roll, and you'll see the difference. Anyway.
Or just make a pilot mad. One of the two.
Or just make a pilot mad every time you say barrel roll and mean an aileron roll. Because barrel roll is a real thing, but it's not what Slippy suggests that you do. Or maybe that is. Maybe Slippy's actually suggesting you do a barrel roll, and Fox is just
Slippy wants you to die. Slippy wants you to die.
Fox is just like, oh, you mean like this? And he just spins in a circle. Slippy's like, no, that's completely useless. No, wait a minute. Yeah, keep doing that. An actual barrel roll will actually help you dodge fire by moving in 3 dimensions simultaneously, but spinning in circles does not help you ricochet fire off your ship. Okay, anyway.
Finishing this off.
He basically hears radio chatter from short-range transmissions in space, and he hears a fight between the Tevarin and the pirates. And so he blows a hole in the side of the station and uses the Cutlass's guns to kill all the pirates, forcing them back. And then he basically goes into the space station with those guns and points them at the Tevarin and says, "Let the girl go." That was a pretty awesome moment. He gets her back, and she's like, I knew you'd come back for me. Like, really? I didn't. I had no idea how he was going to come back for her. So he gets her back. They fight their way out, and just as they're about to leave, our Black Ops guy, who they just finished fighting space battles against all the bad guys, our Black Ops guy blows out the Cutlass's jump drive so they can't leave and follow him. And he's like, sorry guys, gotta go. The UE is already on the way.
Now he's James Bond.
Yeah. UE is already on the way, but I can't quite have you following me. See you later. Like, okay, how did he contact UEE? Who is this guy? He's gone. And then there's this weird romantic twist at the end that also is like my second least favorite part of this. It felt like they didn't earn it. I don't know about you.
It was a quick close up. I'll say that the story just sort of collapses in on this guy's going to do his thing and be mysterious, and then yeah, and then it's like they basically hint that and after all that they're waiting for the UEE. They might as well have sex. And also this line in 11 is what every person reading this story has ever wondered. But he's still here. Why? What makes this Browning so special? Yes, We're all wondering that. No,
Yeah.
we get no answers.
I thought you were going to use it as an allegory, like if you just put, yes, Derek Smart is still here. We don't know why he's still here.
No.
Anyway, I think if you weren't careful, every Star Citizen podcast could just be a podcast making fun of Derek Smart for like an hour. So we have to be careful about that.
Not ours specifically.
No.
Every podcast.
Yes, everyone. They all have to do it. It's careful. So anyway, so that weird romantic twist in the end kind of fell flat for me. So,
but other than that, Ellinger, nicely done.
Very nicely done. I definitely liked it a lot. I felt like I was reading it and I was enjoying it the whole time. So I definitely liked it. His most recent game, Dragon Assault, has been released on Facebook. There you go. Yeah. So, what about the chat room? I don't know how many people in the chat read the story. I'd like to hear your thoughts. I'm curious. I give it, this is strictly comparing it with the other stories I've read from Robert Space Industries in fiction features. I'm not comparing it to Michael Crichton or Patrick Rothfuss. This is just a 10 scale of the other ones involved. I'd give it an 8 out of 10 compared to the other ones.
I'd be a little more generous. I'd give it a 9.
Okay.
I enjoy it. I think it was really well written. I'm not sure if it was the best of the entire lot, but I think it was really well written. The end, maybe a little rushed.
I think I liked...
The rest of it I enjoyed.
I think I liked Tales of Kid Crimson a little more. I know that we had a lot of complaints about Tales of Kid Crimson.
But you enjoyed it for the storytelling.
I enjoyed it, and there was some surprises in there. Like, I expected him to save the day. Instead, the girl just got killed in that one. Spoilers. And that was a really interesting surprise to me.
Spoilers if you didn't watch the other episode.
Or read the other story. I like it when the stories can surprise you like that. I mean, George R.R. Martin does it by killing somebody every other episode, but,
Episode.
Well, I'm talking about the show.
Episode.
Book, whatever.
Book bridger.
Well, no, they kill like 6 people per book. That's why I meant per episode.
Yeah, that's true. Once every couple of chapters. We can go with that.
Yeah. So there's that. So let's see.
Concerns of the week?
We could jump to concerns of the week. Yeah, not a lot of people. Somebody said I read it a long time ago. It didn't hold my interest as much as the Artemis one. The Artemis one, I forgot about that one. I liked that one a lot. I think I give that one a 9, and I give A Human Perspective a 9. I really liked that one as well. I'm leaving room in the 10 spot in case there's one that blows those out of the water, but I don't know. All right, so
I like the Artemis one a lot. That was far away one of my favorites on this.
I want more than any other of these stories to be continued. I want more of, what was it, Tanya something? A Tanya Orlean? No, it was an O. That's going to bother me until I find it.
Not my forte.
Not Orion.
Nat Drat, I don't care about the Star Citizen stories. I'm just here to watch you guys. And we appreciate your viewership.
Yeah. Let's
You
see.
sat here through a book review for a book you didn't care about. We salute you.
There you go. We salute you. Awesome guys who do awesome things. I'm not good. The Lost Generation is the name of the story.
Oriel. Yeah.
Tanya Oriel. That's what it was. So I want that more than anything else. I want the next part of that because that ended on such a freaking cliffhanger. I want to know what happened to the Artemis, and it sounds like they were on the freaking trail. So anyway, we'll go moving on to the concern of the week. We had one from last week that we left off until this week. This is one that is basically, posing the question. Mega large organizations, are they a threat to the persistent universe? Are you going to be able to do anything? Are you going to be able to have an impact unless you're part of a massive organization? Not going to go into the exact arguments here, but what are your original thoughts to that question, Gray?
This is a real hot button issue. A lot of folks are going to be pissed off because if mega orgs are allowed to dominate instances really, really heavily, they're going to be pissed. But they're going to be equally pissed if a mega organization, let's call it, flies in with an Idris and kills them in their Aurora. So the definition of mega organization is going to be nebulous here. Because anyone who's flying small-scale ships will say that it takes a mega organization to run any large-scale ship consistently. But then the people who are consistently running a large-scale ship or two will say a mega organization is defined by a dozen plus large-scale ships. There's going to be a scale here. And the real question is, where does CIG want to draw the line? Do they want to say it's, 50 Idris in a big instance becomes a problem? Do they want to say 100 Idris in an instance becomes a problem? Do they want to say 3 Idris in an instance becomes a problem? I'm not sure we can properly define, as this person wants to, the idea of mega organization yet. And as much as I enjoy a little bit of debate about the idea of, how much a player organization can affect the persistent universe, how many people it's going to take to make enjoyable raid style gameplay, that kind of thing there. And in Legacy, we plan to at least eventually be fielding large ships because, hey, it sounds like fun. It's what we want to be doing.
Yeah.
We want to have people running around in a persistent ship. If we can get a big persistent ship, we'll see. But what's that going to take? And does it take being a mega organization, so to speak, to get 24-hour coverage? We just don't know. I think that there's a part of me that wants to see it just be a bit more free-for-all. This person suggests some ideas about being locked out of instances, after combat, downtime where combat isn't allowed in the same zone or with the same parties or something like that. I'm not sure that's really desirable.
With the amount of verisimilitude they're going for, that's another great word, by the way. It means a feeling of realism, or essentially immersion. With the amount of verisimilitude that they're going for, that they're going for with regards to, Chris Roberts basically wants you to feel like you're in this universe. You don't get to just warp from the Arc Corp, weapons place to your ship. You have to move. You have to go from place to place.
And you shouldn't get to lock people out to make the idea of, well, I want to have time to go salvage without having to PvP in this contested area. No, there is salvage because it's a contested area.
Right, but that's my point.
That's because it's dangerous.
Those kinds of mechanics feel gamey. They take away from verisimilitude. And that's the thing. If you want to create good immersion, good verisimilitude, you have to nail it. It's an all or nothing thing. Because if you have stuff that takes people out of the moment, they just start treating it like a game, and they start gaming the game. I mean, they're going to game the game anyway.
But we have exactly 13 more minutes to do this, or whatever it happens to be. If you're talking timeouts, that really is not going to play well. Just with the rest of the universe.
If you want people to behave like the universe is a real living, breathing place, and they're participating in this,
you kind of have to treat it that way.
You have to treat it that way as far as the mechanics go. The response to the game presents to what the players do has to be a realistic one within the context of the universe. It can't be a gamey one. Now, there are things that are going to be in the universe that are gamey in the sense that they were designed that way to make the game better, but the universe has an explanation for them. Like, why do ships go as slow as they do? Why are people piloting them instead of robots? Like, all of those things have some explanation, but they're there for game design reasons, not because they're realistic. It's kind of the other way.
And there are the questions, obviously, about instance limits, the number of people, that are going to be allowed, that kind of thing there. How many ships are allowed versus how many people. They've been very hesitant to give us a number of people or a number of ships. It's possible that there could be 100 ships where people are thinking it's 100 people right now. We don't know. It's a question of, fidelity with the graphics and their ability to manage all of these ships in a larger, 5 billion kilometer instance. It's going to be difficult for them to justify having very small server limits on a 4 billion kilometer instance.
Yeah. So my thought when we get to this is I kind of go back to what happened in Guild Wars 2, and it wasn't necessarily large organizations or large guilds necessarily. I mean, it was in part.
Large servers.
At that point. Yeah, I mean, the problem that I identified there, and the thing that kind of killed World versus World for me, is that the numbers meant everything. Once you started getting at least 40 to 50 people per side in an engagement,
it was about being capped 24 hours a day.
Yeah, once you started getting groups larger than 20v20, tactics go out the window. It doesn't matter. You're spamming your biggest AoE abilities on the biggest area possible, and whoever has the most people wins. Right? When I played that game, and it was like we had engagements where it was like 12 versus 12 or 15 versus 15. It felt like you had an impact, and that how you organized your group had an impact on how the fight went. And even if it was 15 versus 18 or 15 versus 20, those extra few people didn't make as big a difference as the organization.
But then you got into things that were like our raid busting tactics. We had 20 people and we had to fight 40 or 50. It was just a question of AoE. Like, well, can we AoE heal and AoE damage better than 50 people can individually kill us? That was the entire game, was you spam these 3 buttons on this class, these 3 buttons on this class, and elementalists put up shields so you don't die to siege weapons.
Yeah, that was sort of the disappointing part of that. And then I just think about that, and I think about, if Guild X can bring you can bring 200 people to a fight, and Guild Y can only bring 100. Is that it? Okay, you win. Like, we don't even have to fight this. Like, here, we'll just leave our ships. You can blow them up, and we'll go. Like, that to me, I struggle thinking of a non-gamey solution to that problem. I mean, the instances kind of mean that's going to make a difference, but...
Part of the question is what AoE and all that means. In Star Citizen, we do have the advantage that you can't just say, I'm going to target this circle on the ground and blow it up.
Yeah.
And if you bullet hose, your bullet is, 20 millimeters wide. And that's really easy to miss with.
True. Yeah, I would argue that...
You can't just bullet hose the entirety of space.
There's a higher skill cap, or there's going to be a higher skill cap in Star Citizen than there was in Guild Wars 2. So individual skill can matter, and you're very right in that there's a lot less. Though I think there probably will be AoE things. But if you remember, I think EVE Online had those smart bombs, and everybody hated those because they were like this big AoE.
I don't see those being a thing.
Yeah,
I could see them having torpedoes, but I see torpedoes more likely. This is just as I currently have the opinion, this is what it looks like to me. Torpedoes being more of a shaped charge.
Oh, absolutely. I think torpedoes are going to be specifically for getting through big armor on big ships.
I don't see them firing a torpedo out into the middle of space and saying, a kilometer in each direction is now burned. I just don't think they're going to do it.
I mean, that's the typical, like, you just nuke this area, right?
Yeah,
but even
I'm not sure we're going to see nukes.
A lot of the space sci-fi I've read, nukes don't have a big enough explosion radius to do a lot of damage because ships are usually spread out like a kilometer apart, right? So even in most sci-fi, and the other thing is a nuke detonating in space isn't as devastating as a nuke detonating on a planet because you don't have any of the fallout. So that's the other major part of that, is that the radiation kills a lot of people even if the blast doesn't, and the pressure wave kills people. But there's no pressure in space. At least very little pressure, I should say. I mean, even in the vacuum of space, there are small amounts of actual atmosphere or particulates, whatever you want to call them. But there's no real pressure, none of any significant note, right? So that means that nukes just aren't as effective as you would think. You have to get people pretty close in order to actually damage them with one. That comes back to, yes, that's going to solve a lot of the problem. There's going to be no AoE, so you can't just... But at the same time, one of the things in Guild Wars 2 that allowed organized small groups to work against bigger groups is when those siege weapons worked as AoE, and dozens of people flooding through a small opening that they made in a wall would get murdered by 6 arrow carts. But then they nerfed the hell out of the arrow carts so that they only could hit like 5 or 10 people at a time instead of the whole area, and it just made it so that small groups had no chance anymore. So without AoE, is that going to be a problem in Star Citizen?
I mean, just to sort of come back to the Mega Large Org question on that, I don't think that there's ever going to be a counter to more ships.
You're right.
I just don't think it's something that people will be able to say, I have a balancing factor that will prevent me, or not even more ships, more people, that will prevent me from dying to more people. They may be able to run. They may be able to have better ships that provide a better force multiplier, but anyone who believes that they can go out there and solo versus 10 people is in for a really rude awakening.
Yeah, because you're going to run out of flares.
And if they and their 5 friends think that they will be the intergalactic pirate force to be dealt with as 6 people, when you have, anti-pirate orgs already in existence with 10,000, they're going to be really, really screwed. And there's no polite way to say that.
But could you be a regional power? Maybe with 6 or 10 people, you could be a small, you could be known. Sure. When you go to that particular.
In the same way that you could be a regional power in EVE with that kind of thing, if nobody else cared about the zone.
Right.
It's going to be a numbers game. There will be a numbers game involved here, and skill will count for a lot. But when you start getting to 4 or 5 to 1. You've seen what happens in Vandal Swarm. Vandals suck, but you put 4 or 5 glaives on a person and they just melt.
Yeah.
That's how it works.
So,
maybe people will survive longer with big hardened shield heavy ships like the Starliner or a Banu Merchantman or that kind of thing, but I don't see a Merchantman killing 10 people.
Here's an interesting thought. 90% of the population is NPC. 10% is supposed to be player, right? That's the idea, the 9 to 1 ratio. Well, if you have some big war and one side has obviously more people involved, could the designers, for these very big, set piece battles where it's the equivalent of Band of Brothers or the equivalent of one of those big EVE organizations, could you then balance it by having NPCs financially support the little guy and say, hey, any mercs out there that want to go fight with these little guys will pay for you to join them?
Maybe
that's a in fiction way, and now you can come up with whatever reason that you want. Maybe you could argue that there are NPC factions that don't want one big faction, so if one faction gets too big,
that could be part of
a balance of power
idea.
Thing, right?
Yeah, you could start saying if this system is, let's say it's a lawful system, then the only organizations that would be in a lawful system controlling territory or trying to control territory would be pirates. So the little guys would be with the lawful NPCs trying to fight you off. Maybe they'll send support ships, AI, who knows. If you're in an unlawful system, it's possible there would be authorities who are trying to do missions to give help and that kind of thing. I think you're right. That could be a balancing factor.
The other thing might be...
It's just a question of what the systems are like to start with to make that work with the lore.
The other thing might be space. Your organization doesn't get to hold on to a certain amount of space unless they have a certain number of people, or they vice versa. If you have a certain number of people, you have a cap. You can't have any more people if you haven't conquered a certain amount of space. Right? This is for large organizations that are trying to grab space in the outer area similar to EVE. But the idea there is it will always try and balance so that even if you have a very large organization, it means they have a large area that they have to defend. Yeah. And if they're in a war somewhere else, that leaves their back door open for another attack from a different person, and now they're stretched thinner than they otherwise might be. That's a balance of power, too.
I'm not sure we'll see org limitations because it's as simple as getting another org, creating another org with people.
A lot of people in the chat are like, oh, well, they'll just say that you can't have any more people. Yeah, but then they'll just have 2 orgs, and it'll be org 1 and org 2, and they're both the same org any other way, but mechanically they're just not.
Yeah. They'll have to have some interesting algorithms to figure out, are these people actually related to one another in order to prevent abuse. But that's the hope, at least in my case, is that the ship limit will be a thing rather than the personnel limit, and the ship limit will be high enough that in most cases it's not going to be a problem. But even 100 ship limit, that would be a big starting point, at least.
Yeah,
we could see.
That's what I've been hoping for the whole time. If we can fit 100 ships in one instance, I will be a happy camper. I fear that it's going to be much lower than that. I fear that we're going to be stuck at 25 or 30, and there's just going to be fight. And maybe that's a good thing, though. Maybe it's good that there's a bunch of small skirmishes going on within this larger fight. I've always conceptualize this whole thing as collapsing instances as ships are destroyed. So there's there's 6 different fights, all of them are 25 on 25. As one side wins its fight, it's collapsed into another one that has lost its fight, and those 2 sides will continue to fight in there, and then eventually everything is collapsed down into one instance. The last 25 people alive on one side are fighting, the remaining group. And that group may or may not still have reinforcements standing around. That in itself would prevent a lot of the abuse of having too many people if you were stuck 25 versus 25, if that upper instance limit wasn't very high. But even if it's 100, that'll be fine, if you ask me. If it's 1,000, which I don't think they could do technically, but if it's 1,000, then that's a problem, because you could have one org with 1,000 people in it that brings that much power to bear, and another org with 100, and there's no way they win, or another org with 500, there's no way they win. But if an org that has, a bunch of them can at least, the org with 100 just fights a 100 and 100 battle and wins decisively the next 100 file, and it's basically like the 300. Right? You're sitting there in a cramped space, and their numbers mean nothing if you have the skill to back it up. That's what I want to see, and I hope to see that.
Nice. All right. I would agree. I'd love to see it.
So Gray has to take off, so this is probably going to be the end here, but we started on time, and we're about an hour and a half, so we're ending on time as well. Huzzah!
Oh my God. I blame Callie. Everything else has been Callie's fault, clearly.
Yes. When Callie's not here... Everything goes well. Hopefully we'll see him in 2 weeks, but of course he's just going to be having a new baby soon, so that might not be possible. We'll see.
Tales of babbies.
Yeah, hopefully in 2 weeks we'll be able to talk about Star Marine. Might be able to. It might be.
Hey, wait, CitizenCon soon, right?
Yeah.
And CCU. We can talk about CCU 2 weeks.
All right, guys. Thanks for watching. I have been Bridger. With me has been Gray, if I'm pointing in that direction. And we've been reviewing Orbital Supermax. We don't have the next one. Oh, you know what? The Law. What's the one that has Law in the name? Let's do that
another
one
Law.
next.
I think it is.
There's something specific about it. A separate Law.
A separate Law.
We'll do that one next time. It won't be right next. We're going to have another bit of time before. So you've got some time. So if you're ever stuck somewhere and you want to, you're just, I got nothing to do right now. I've got my phone. Pull up the Robert Space Industries site and read through that story. So far, all of them have been good. We'll see how this one is. But I am looking forward to it. Until 2 weeks from now, have a good one, guys. The 4th of November. October. All right.
This is bullshit.
No, that wasn't supposed to play. I had that. It just kept playing the
that
sound.
queued up the whole time.
I didn't mean to. I was like, oh, I've done that last time. I don't need to do it again. There, it just played. Damn it. All right. Whatever happened to the real cockpit Bridger was going to build instead of the green screen? I was never going to build an actual cockpit. I need to run an Indiegogo campaign. Help me build my real fake cockpit.
Of minus turret, yeah.
Yeah. Of minus
all right.
turret.
Well, I've got to run, so I will
right.
catch you later.
Talk to you later, Gray. All right. So we've got the post-game chat, and it's just me this time, which is weird. Yeah. But yeah, definitely check out, if you guys haven't read it, The Name of the Wind. Patrick Rothfuss's books are freaking amazing, man. I think they're my favorite books right now. And there's some really good versions on Audible that I listen to. But yeah, they're great. And I've been liking his new podcast. I also like this podcast, Hello Internet, which is CGP Grey and a guy named Brady Heron, who does a number of different YouTube channels. And CGP Grey has his own YouTube channel. And that's another really great two dudes talking podcast that I'm a big fan of. So that is definitely something I recommend as well. There's actually a lot of parallels between the two of them. But yeah. So what else has been going on? I don't know. Not much. I've been playing Battlefield 4 again because, damn, that's a fun game. And you actually can play it for free for a week. I didn't even know that. Like, anybody can play it for free for a whole week if they want to try it out. That's actually really smart. I'm surprised. I mean, Valve does do that, right? They have free weekends for Left 4 Dead or this or that where you can just download and play a game. But this one, they just said anybody who wants to. This is a non-expiring offer. You know, you play it free for 1 week from the time you launch it. So it's kind of a different take on it. I don't know if it's better, although it does. I don't know. Free weekend guarantees that there's going to be a lot of people centered on that specific weekend, doesn't it? That's kind of an advantage to that kind of thing. But the other thing I noticed when playing Battlefield 4 is they have dozens of different types of game modes now. Not just hardcore versus normal, but also rush versus conquest versus obliteration versus this new naval strike thing, which apparently has no servers. It's like the Titan mode from the old 2142, but nobody's playing it, and I don't know why. It came out with one of the expansions, and I guess it was really bad because there's not a single server out there playing that game mode, and I don't know. Metal Gear Solid 5 drives me insane because it's a controller-only interface, and I hated it. I really wanted to use my keyboard and mouse, and I use my keyboard and mouse for the actual gameplay, but you can't use the mouse on the interface, and so they have you controlling this whole metagame where you have to build up this base and assign people to various pieces of the base, and you have to do everything with a controller-like thing, with WASD moving stuff around and clicking on things, and it's just terrible. The UI UX on it is god-awful as far as I'm concerned. And as good as the AI was and the weird stuff that was going on, the goofiness of it just drove me crazy. Like, when I had a giant fire whale chasing me, that's just like, I did rage quit right there for a while. I guess I'm missing a lot from previous Metal Gear games. It's also just not my kind of game. In part, it was too easy because it's designed as this stealth game where the game encourages you to be stealthy, but it just lets you go wild and kill everyone super easy. Like, I just sit on a hill with a sniper rifle and just kill everybody with headshots. And I think that's not supposed to be possible because you're supposed to be using a controller and it's supposed to be too hard to do that. But I'm using a keyboard and mouse. So I'm just like, click dead, click dead, click dead, click dead, click dead. Wow, this is easy. Now I took this thing and I could just walk in and finish the mission. Like, that was just so freaking easy that I stopped doing it. And I tried starting to do the stealth approach because it was a little more challenging, but it was also super boring. It was like waiting simulator 10,000. Like, I just there's a guy there, just gotta wait a minute later he'll have moved, and then I have to look over there, that guy's in the right place, now I can come up behind this guy and stealthily kill him. Like, you have to wait for all the stars to align before you do this, and it was satisfying when I did it at the end, but it wasn't really. You just sat there waiting for so much of it. That having been said, there were some really cool moments in it, and I liked the cool moments, but it wasn't enough to rescue the horrible. And the amount of time I sit there waiting for the cutscene of the helicopter is insane. Like, you do a mission, you get the helicopter to leave the mission, but like, he gets in the helicopter, he stares out for a good 20 seconds, then closes the door, then you're allowed to pick the next mission. When you pick the next mission, you're sitting there in the helicopter for 25 seconds while it gets to the drop-off point, then you wait 10 seconds while it goes down, then you hop out, then you can do the mission. So it's literally like, you're done with this mission, you wait 60 seconds, then you go to the next mission. And it was a frustrating pause in the elements. And I like the verisimilitude of it, but over time, it was just too much. But I have been really enjoying Mad Max, but Mad Max has a different problem. They actually put too much content into Mad Max. It's really weird. They did this open world game and all the pieces of it are really enjoyable, if a little too easy. Like, having played Batman and the Shadow of Mordor game, like, the melee combat was challenging a little bit at one time, but it's stupid easy most of the time. And they did add a little bit to it, but the enemies didn't seem to have enough special things that would counter your normal tactics to make it more interesting, at least not at the difficulty part where I am. But they put in too much stuff for you to do. Like, if you're one of those people that gets satisfaction over completionists type stuff, this game will keep you busy for hours, but I don't know if it'll keep you busy having fun. It'll keep you busy because you feel compelled to make sure you 100% it. But at some point, I was just like, well, I'm not going to 100% each of these zones, because some of the things that it wants me to do is fun the first time and then boring the second 6 times. And then you go to the more difficult zone, and it's a little more fun again because some things have changed, but then it's boring the rest of the time once you've mastered the changes. So I really enjoy a lot of things about Mad Max, and I think everybody will, as long as you stop doing the things that you don't enjoy. That's the thing. Like, everybody, the critics complained about it, and they said, oh, it's so repetitive and blah, blah, blah. And like, yes, it is, but it's an open world game that lets you do what you want to do. You don't have to go and do those things if you don't want to. Like, one of the most annoying things I thought was we had to go and sweep for these mines. It was a cool mechanic the first time I did it, but every other time I hated doing it. And it's like, you get your dog, and you put your little dog in the buggy, and you drive around. The dog sniffs and smells and finds the mine, and he like points in the direction of it and reveals the mine to you. And I was like, oh, that's a really cool interaction. I like it. And then it's just a waste of boring time as you're driving around looking for the mines. So anyway, Vin suggested that no, they don't have anything in the wheels to help the F-18 Hornets. All the wheels do is steer. Okay, so he apologized for being wrong there. So anyway, that's what I think about those games. And I've still been playing a lot of Mad Max. I still want to finish it. The story is really interesting, and I want to figure out what happens next. And the car combat is really fun and satisfying. And taking down a convoy by yourself, especially the more armored ones later on, can be really hectic and crazy. And like, I almost die and just barely make it at the end. And it's really cool. I like it a lot. So there's that. And I think that's enough of me talking. So we'll talk to you guys later. I'm going to go talk to Legacy guys about a chapter meeting. So have a good one, everybody. See you later.